Today, we're diving into a book that does more than just throw some new ideas at you. It really challenges the very foundation of how we see reality, science, and, our place in this whole universe. And trust me, that is not an exaggeration. The main idea in this book, The Field, it's so big that it pretty much creates a dividing line in your life. There's how you saw the world before you read it, and how you see it after. So, to really get the huge shift this book is talking about, we first have to go back. We have to understand the world it's trying to replace, the one most of us learned about in school. For the longest time, our scientific story has been propped up by two main pillars, Newton and Darwin. Newton, he gave us a universe that runs like a giant clock, predictable, mechanical, made up of a bunch of separate things. Then, Darwin comes along and adds that life on our little rock is basically a random, ruthless fight to survive. The main theme here? Separation. Everything is separate. This whole way of thinking puts us on the outside, looking in. We're just spectators watching this giant cosmic machine do its thing, totally disconnected from it and from each other. It's a vision of reality that, when you really think about it, can feel pretty cold and honestly kind of lonely. But here's the thing. This neat, tidy clockwork model, it has a problem, a big one. It's got cracks. There are these profound human experiences, and even some scientific weirdness that it just can't explain. Not at all.
And this is where the story really takes a turn. What happens when your own direct experience completely clashes with the scientific story you've been told? Well, it happened to a man who had gone farther from Earth than almost anyone else in history.
Okay, so picture this. You've got Edgar Mitchell. He's an astronaut, right? A man of science, of engineering. He's on his way back from the moon, and as he's looking out the little window of his spacecraft, he's suddenly hit by this feeling, not of separation, but of this deep, overwhelming connection to everything, a feeling of total unity with the cosmos. And his scientific training? It had absolutely nothing to say about it. That huge gap, that mystery, sent him on a lifelong mission to find some answers.
So Mitchell's quest wasn't just his own. It mirrors a much bigger search happening in science. One that's pointing to a totally new way of seeing things. It suggests there's this hidden layer to reality that we've been missing all along. And at the center of this new paradigm is a concept called the zero-point field. Now, I want you to forget everything you learned about empty space. Quantum physics is telling us that what we call a vacuum is actually a buzzing, roiling sea of energy, a plenum of quantum activity that connects every single thing in the entire universe. Now, the implication of this is it's staggering. If this field is the real ground floor of reality, then matter, this table, your body, the stars in the sky, it isn't really solid. It's more like a temporary ripple, a little disturbance, a flicker of condensed energy in this massive underlying ocean. So here's the crucial part. The field isn't just a passive backdrop. It's the source of everything. It's like a universal hard drive, a memory bank. And it's the medium for constant, instantaneous communication between everything. In fact, physicists like Puthoff, Ruda, and Heisch are even proposing that fundamental things we take for granted, like mass itself, are nothing more than an object's interaction with this energy field. Okay, I know, this is a mind-bending idea, but it's not just philosophy or some cool thought experiment. For decades, scientists on the fringes, working at some very prestigious places, have been gathering data that seems to point right at the existence and influence of the field. I mean, just look at the evidence coming from these completely different areas. At Princeton, you have researchers finding that human thought alone can actually nudge random machines. At SRI, you have government-funded projects showing people can accurately describe faraway places they can't see. And in biophysics, you've got Fritz-Albert Popp discovering that living cells talk to each other through organized fields of light. They're all pointing to the same incredible conclusion: we are all deeply connected. So let's zoom in on those Princeton experiments for a sec. They had people sit in front of a random number generator. Think of it as a super fast digital coin flipper, and just intend for it to produce more heads or tails. And look, the effect was tiny, a shift from a perfect 50-50 to maybe 51%. It doesn't sound like a big deal, right? But, and this is the absolute kicker, that tiny little effect was so incredibly consistent over millions and millions of trials that the odds of it just being a random fluke were calculated to be less than 1 in a trillion. So yeah, a small effect, but a very, very real one. And then there's the remote viewing research, which gets even weirder. In one famous experiment, a guy named Pat Price was asked to describe a park.
He got the pools perfect, but he also drew these two huge water tanks that, well, they weren't there. A whole year later, a researcher just happens to find a photo of that same park from 1913. And what do you know? There they were, the water tanks, exactly where Price had drawn them. He hadn't just seen across space, somehow he had seen across time. Okay, so deep breath. If these experiments are real, and if the field is real, what on earth does that mean for us, for our everyday lives? It means we need a totally new way of thinking about how we interact with the world. The book basically breaks it down into this simple three-step model. First, you have the field, this universal web connecting us all. Second, our brains aren't just processors stuck in our skulls. They're more like two-way radios or transceivers that can both receive info from the field and broadcast back to it. And third, our focused thoughts, our intentions, those are the signals we're broadcasting out, and they can create real, measurable effects. And maybe the most jaw-dropping evidence for this whole idea is something called the Global Consciousness Project. Think of it as the Princeton experiment, but on a planetary scale, with these random number generators all over the world. What the researchers found is that during moments of intense shared global focus, huge events like 9/11 or Princess Diana's funeral, even global New Year's celebrations, these machines all around the planet suddenly stop being random. They become orderly. It's as if the collective mind of humanity is creating a coherent wave in the field. And that leads us to the ultimate, most empowering conclusion of all this work. If we are constantly tuning into and broadcasting into a field that literally shapes reality, well, then we're not just passive spectators in some lonely universe anymore. We are active participants. We are co-creators of our world. This leaves us with a really profound question, one to carry with us. The science of the field suggests our feeling of separation is just an illusion, and that our connection is the fundamental truth. So if we really are part of the universe's creative process, what kind of world do we want to create together?